Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock and I declare this special meeting open. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the region in which we meet tonight, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters, their culture and community, as we pay our respects to their elders past, present and descendants. Item 2, and I also welcome everyone in the public gallery. All councillors are present and anyone watching on live stream. Item 2, the disclaimer. The terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry to the public gallery. We request that members of the public to read them prior to attending and to abide by them. Apologies and attendance. All councillors are present in the chamber. We have one staff member, Reshma, attending electronically. Item 4, declarations of financial proximity or interest affecting impartiality. I've one to read out. It should be on the whiteboard and in your notes. It's from the Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Kane. It's a financial interest. It's in item C 1.1, and the item relates to his probationary period and performance review, remuneration and future performance targets. Thank you. Item 5, public question time. There have been no written questions. I'll ask any member of the public if they wish to ask a question on any item on the agenda. Being no questions, we'll move to item 6, which is deputations. And I've received 2 very late deputations and I've agreed to hear from those ladies. So if I could ask Jane Genovese to come forward on item 1.1, and you have 5 minutes to make your deputation. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Jane Genovese. I'm a Guildford resident. I'm here tonight to talk about the importance of keeping the Guildford Library open. I've been using the Guildford Library since I moved to the area about 9 years ago. This library is not just a building filled with a bunch of books. This is a place of learning opportunities, and it's a gateway to lifelong learning for many people. The Guildford Library is a unique place. If you've ever been in there, you'll know that this is not your average library. It's not a big library. It's a cosy, warm and welcoming place. This is why so many of us love the Guildford Library. In fact, this library is so loved by our local community that it has its very own Friends of Guildford Library group, Fogel. Fogel recently established a partnership with the local business, the Guildford Garden Centre. Fogel has organised a Justice of the Peace, Mr. Tom Pullich, to be at the library once a month on a Saturday. This group has also set up a seed library and a monthly children and carers book club. You have to remember that Fogel is made up of volunteers, these Fogel members. They organise these events because they care deeply about the local library. This place has they value this precious community resource. Local libraries open up new worlds and possibilities for people. This has been the case for me. I come from a working class family. My parents are both orchardists. As a child, I would help my parents pick and pack fruit for the markets on school holidays. It was tough, grueling work. I remember thinking, I don't want to be picking and packing fruit for the rest of my life. I saw how exhausted my parents were all the time. This motivated me to create a better life for myself, so I started reading books, and I can thank having easy access to a library for this. The other thing about libraries are they are great equalisers in society. They provide equal access to information and resources, regardless of one's financial position. They bridge the digital divide, providing internet access to those who can't afford to have it at home. They serve a safe and inclusive space where everyone is welcome. They promote education and foster intellectual growth. Closing the doors to the Guildford Library would send a message that the City of Swan and this council devalues education, that it devalues knowledge, that it doesn't care about the well-being of its residents. It would rob our seniors of a place to connect, learn and socialise with others. While I understand this council's desire to alleviate financial burdens on ratepayers, I strongly believe that this decision would be a terribly short-sighted move that would ultimately cost our community. Closing our library may appear to be a quick fix to free up some savings, but the true cost would far outweigh any perceived benefits. By depriving our community of this invaluable resource, we undermine the very essence of education and personal growth. This regressive step would disproportionately affect the most vulnerable community members of our community: students, seniors, low-income families who rely on the library as a lifeline. I've made a lot of good friends through visiting the Guildford Library. Many of my friends are here in the gallery tonight. I've seen many other people find personal connection at the Guildford Library. I've seen the unemployed using the internet there to apply for jobs. Councillors, we are currently in a cost of living crisis. Access to local libraries helps to alleviate the financial burden placed on individuals and families. What could be more important than keeping this local library open?
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
I urge you to look beyond short-term savings and keep the Guildford Library open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I now call to the microphone the next deputation on the same item, Jane Dewing. Thank you, Jane. You also have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. I also wish to pay my respects to the Wadjuk Noongar people on whose country I live and where we meet tonight. I urge you to support the Guildford Library. Contrary to the proposal, the closure would not be of negligible effect on the Guildford community. The library is valued and a really important part of the Guildford community. It provides a safe space for children, for the disadvantaged, for the elderly, to, as Jane has said, to meet. Many mothers and children attend story time and rhyme time each week. The provision of a JP, which Fogel, Friends of Guildford Library, has organised recently, has seen a number of people come to the Guildford Library. I know that JPs are available in other libraries around the city, but there obviously is a need for that service in Guildford because he's been busy every single time he comes. The community is invested in the library through the Friends of Guildford Library, which is for a community group, obviously. We have worked with the city over the last few years, even through the lockdown, through Zoom meetings, through meeting online, to try and work with the city to make the library more relevant to the community, to increase the patronage of the library. It's been difficult during COVID because it is a very small space and numbers have been very limited, and coming back from that has been tricky, but we're working again still with the City of Swan Library to develop into a really warm, welcoming space. We've worked with them to change the layout to make it more user-friendly, to provide funky egg chairs, upgrade the kids' space. So the library is very valued. Jane mentioned the recent partnership with the Guildford Garden Centre. The Garden Centre, as part of their 30th anniversary, looked around for a community group to support, and they chose the Guildford Library because of the community involvement in it. We, Fogel and members of the community, revamped a neglected garden bed outside the library to make it more inviting, make the library look better. The Guildford Garden Centre is going to work with us to do another bed between the library and the town hall to beautify that, make it look more cared for. They were providing talks on gardening related business items. They have supported our Name the Quenda competition. We've got these little quendas which are going to be the library mascots. We've had a community competition which we had numerous entries. They are providing part of the prize for that. So we've, as far as I know, we're the only library in the city who has a partnership with a local business. We're the only library in the state, as we've been advised, who has a community-led library, and we value it. It's an integral part of the community. It's one of the only community facilities we have in Guildford. We don't have sporting facilities. We don't have a rec centre, we don't have a swimming pool, we have the library. And we value that and we want to retain that. And I don't personally see why my rates, which pay for the library in part, should be neglected, in that I'm a ratepayer too. I live in the community, and why should my community resource be taken away? I ask you that you would, it's only a small part of the city budget. It may be an expensive library for a small part of the community, but it is really valued. And I urge you to support the library and to defeat this motion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. That leads on to item 7, members' questions. Any members' questions on the agenda tonight on this item? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I've got a few questions. A number of people have indicated their rates have gone up over the last 3 years. Why is this, and how can the city state there's been a 0% rate increase?
Is it Reshma or you, Mr. CEO?
Again, through the chair, if I could, Mr. Mayor, without knowing the specifics of individuals, the only reason why a person's property would have moved would have been an adjustment to their GRV particular. So the possibility that they have had a change of use in the property. For instance, in my own case, I had a housing renovation done a number of years ago. I had an extra bathroom. Therefore, I got an interim rate assessment that would lead to a variation. But where the rate in the dollar hasn't changed, that would be the only base change.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My next question through you, it goes on to the rate in the dollar. If the rate in the dollar remained the same as last year, does this mean the GRV rates would go up an average of 15%? And UV rates would go up an average of 9% because of the revaluation?
Mr. CEO, if you can answer.
Thank you again to the chair. The rate in the dollar and what gets charged as rate is a balancing activity. So as the GRV goes up, in order to raise the same amount of rates, the rate in the dollar goes down. So if the GRV is lifted by 15%, or the UV is listed by 9%, and you keep the same rate in the dollar, you're raising 15% more income on the residential component and 9% on the vacant.
So, Mr. Mayor, the next question, and I've seen comments that local governments and the City of Swan manipulates the rate in the dollar comment, and it's been mentioned more than one occasion to me. You've sort of explained, Mr. CEO, why the rate in the dollar will fluctuate, and that's basically to balance that budget to offset the increases in GRV. Am I correct?
You are correct. In fact, just to come back to the issue of manipulation, council adopts the rates in the dollar, and that's why you have the decision before you tonight. Staff don't adopt the rates in the dollar, and there are very specific protocols around the rates in the dollar. So once they adopt it, they can't be adjusted at any time throughout the year. So the only form of balancing happens is when you have typically a movement in the rate in the dollar, which would happen once every year as council considers as part of its budget. But every 3 years, there is a very significant movement, and that's what's called the triennial revaluation, where the valuer general goes around to every householder and says, I'm reassessing the gross rental value of your property. And as those gross rental values rise, the requirement then is on the city to lower the rate in the dollar so it only derives the same amount of income.
Thank you. Just a couple more, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Please continue.
It's an important issue. The total budget for 23-24, the operating expenditure is roughly 206 million. If I read that right, in one of the workshops I saw 206 million.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you. The earlier ones, it was. The final budget at the moment is $210 million, and that reflects the most recent cost increase we had from Western Power of another $250,000 lighting costs, as well as some movement in the costs of contract. So $210,000 is the operating cost of the budget. 210 million. Thank you. I'm a couple of numbers short.
Mr. Mayor, of that 210 million, would it be correct to state that there's only 2 areas that the city has full control on, and they are employee costs and materials and contracts?
Mr.
CEO. Thank you. Invariably, yes. If you look at the breakdown of what's known as nature of type on a standard statement of financial activity, The utility charges we are charged are set by others. The depreciation we have is set by the accounting standards. The interest we pay on the loans is set by the rate at which we borrowed. None of those are variable costs. Again, similarly, the insurance cost, which is going up some 10% for next year, is set by what the market does. Even when you come to the two more significant areas of expenditure, the employee costs and materials and contracts, a lot of those are fixed. For instance, if the city is required by statute to deliver a service, so planning services, the health services, the building services, and some of our ranger services or emergency services are all requirements to deliver by statute. Even though it's a variable cost for us, you don't get a choice. You have to deliver that service, and that element is really fixed.
So, Mr. Mayor, my final question, obviously there's a $5 million shortfall. That's why potentially rates will be going up. If it was to come from operating to keep everything the same, obviously reduction in operating expenditure, it'd have to come from employee costs and materials and contracts. And am I correct in my calculations that would roughly require a 6.9% reduction across the board in those two categories?
Mr. CEO.
Without working the numbers, it's probably likely to be higher than that, but it would be at least that number. As I said, if you take into account those services which the council is obliged to deliver, now, Planning and Development Act, the Health Act, the Building Act, all prescribed services that a local government have to deliver, you would simply need to reduce the other services by at least that quantum. And typically then you'd come back to those services which are the ones, social services mentioned tonight, like things like libraries and leisure centres. That's the only real form of variable area that you can more particularly stop.
Councillor Johnson, do you have questions?
I've got a question, Mr. Mayor. Really, it's about the order here. I've been informed by a member of the public that they didn't realise that number 5 was public question time, and I'm wondering whether we could go back to 5, section 5, to allow someone in the public gallery to ask a question.
Well, I thought I made it very clear, Councillor Johnson, that time's been and gone.
All
I'll
right.
move forward with the meeting.
All right. In that case, can I move a motion to suspend section 2.1 of the meeting procedure, local law, order of business, to enable us to go back to section 5, public question time?
You can move the motion, Councillor Johnson. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, then your motion to suspend section 2.1 of the standing orders to go back to public question time is approved, but I was against. It would just be noted, saying I made that ruling. I thought I made it very clear. I asked if there was people in the gallery wanted to ask questions. I waited some time. I moved on. So is there someone in the audience who'd like to ask a public question? You can please come to the podium, state your name and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Anita Rao. I'm currently a resident in Guildford, but can't afford it anymore, so I just sold my house. So I only found out about the meeting half an hour, and I only found out about the motion half an hour before. So I'm sorry, I was just reading it to try and find out what was actually happening. So my apologies that I missed when it was the opportunity to ask a question. I was still trying to get my head around how the closure of the library is suddenly in here in discussion in the rate rise. My question is, having just done a very quick search on all the consultation feedback, the mention of library, I only found the word library once. It was not related to Guildford Library. So my question is how Guildford Library, what am I going to ask? How this, really I want to know how this is happening without any public consultation, without Fogel being told, without any of the community being told. There's an apology in here for the Swan Guildford Historical Society not being told that they may get their carpeted room that they would like, but there's nothing in here to say how the community were going to be told that this could potentially be the closure of the library in order to make these rate shortcomings. So my main question is the lack of consultation and how that can be addressed, and that this actually be consulted before a decision of this major impact that it says will have negligible impact to the community. It's negligible impact because none of the community knew. So it's only negligible impact from what you were hearing.
I think you've asked your question, Ms. Rowell.
Thank you.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I could just address the purpose of the meeting tonight is the consideration of proposed differential rates. So it's not specifically for the adoption of the budget. In presenting the differential rates, has been an alternative motion presented tonight that would allow for a lower rate increase than the city had advertised. The proposal contained in that noted that one of the ways that could be funded would be the closure of the Guildford Library. So the Guildford Library itself is not up for consideration tonight, nor the closure of the Guildford Library, but is the adoption of differential rates. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but what's the process and the procedures and the instruments at play to then make that decision?
So if I could, through Mr. Chair,
Please continue.
Mr. Mayor, so subject to Council's resolution tonight, and whichever resolution it makes, a council will be simply adopting rates in the dollar. Those rates in the dollar will have a specific revenue generating capability. To produce a balanced budget, that is something where all of the income matches all of their costs, it would be up to the council to consider what it does if there's a revenue shortfall. Now, that could entail, such as been mentioned tonight, a closure of a facility. However, I believe, and the discussions I've had with other councillors, there might be an amendment to a motion tonight that talks about that before council, but it's not up to me to deal with that. I need to leave that for council's consideration.
Thank you. Someone else had their hand up. If you please come to the podium, state your name and ask your question. Thank you.
My name's Leander Gibson. I'm a local Guildford resident and I've lived around the corner from the library for 17 years. So my question is, do councillors understand that libraries play a really different role in people's lives? So it's not just that, well, you're close to the Midland Library, so therefore you've got access to a library. The fact that different libraries play a different role in people's lives. So we're a member of 6 libraries and we go to different libraries for different reasons. Guildford Library is really, really important to children who have got sensory needs and need a really, really small library, or anyone who's got sensory needs and a small library which is local and that they know about, they know the staff, they have a personal relationship with the staff, and it's not loud and noisy. There's some beautiful libraries out there, and I hope the renovation of the Midland Library will be like that, but it may not be sensory friendly, in which case that really cuts children off from going to those places. So I'd like to know if you have an understanding of that. Thank you.
It's up for each councillor to respond if they wish to, but yes, I was at the Guildford Library last week with Councillor Bowman and think it's quite a unique little library. I'll ask again, are there any other questions from members in the gallery? Being no further questions, I need a motion to go back to standing orders. Move Councillor Johnson, seconded Councillor Bowman. Thank you very much, councillors. As no one object, going back to standing orders, then thank you. That takes us to item 8.
Got another question.
Another question, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a question, Mr. Mayor, about the order of the alternate motions for item 1.1. So my understanding is that I submitted my alternate motion on Tuesday the 23rd and Councillor Zanino submitted his this Saturday. So I'm just wondering why Councillor Zanino's is ahead of mine.
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you. And Councillor Johnson, you would be aware that I provided you a comprehensive email response to that, but just for the benefit of all other elected members, under our standing orders, clause 6.1, an alternate motion may be moved by an elected member. But for an alternate motion to be moved, you need to have the officer's recommendation in the public domain. Now, until the officer's recommendation, which is contained in the agenda, is published, you can't receive alternate motions. If not, you won't know, for instance, what the motions are you're seeking to put an alternate motion to. So under the alternate motion protocol, we received motions in chronological order. An alternate motion 2 must address the item that's before council. It can't be just, I've got an alternate motion on X. It needs to relate to the specific issue, and the specific issue is being, this particular case, the rates in the dollar. In forming alternate motions, 2 elected members have both approached me seeking to have an alternate motion developed, one being Councillor Johnson, the other being Councillor Zanino. Councillor Zanino had submitted his alternate motion on Saturday morning, or Saturday at, I think, roughly 6 o'clock in the evening. That included the detailed rates in the dollar that were necessary to achieve the objective he lodged. As Councillor Johnson had previously been advised by me, the modelling that would be necessary to produce detailed rates in the dollar in order to be able to facilitate a proposal that he would like would require comprehensive work which wouldn't be completed to Monday. Having formulated that table of rates, we provided Councillor Johnson with a form of the motion on Monday. He then came back to me, asked whether he could include other parts, and I said, well, unfortunately you can't, because the bits you're doing aren't up for Council's consideration. The item tonight is not the budget, it's the adoption of differential rates. On that basis, Councillor Johnson came back and said, noted and approved. He then circulated his alternative to elected members. At that point in time, it was lodged and formed in the agenda on Monday at whatever time of the evening. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, you have a question?
I just want to follow on. I got a follow-on question.
Follow-up question from Councillor Johnson first.
But mine was in there first. I mean, that's been our protocol for many years. I wasn't able to complete all the details of it because it required computer modelling. So that's been our protocol. So I'm just wondering, this doesn't answer, and I look at part 6.1 of the meeting procedures local law. I don't see any of that in there. So I think mine should come first.
Well, I'm taking advice from the CEO. I thought he made it quite clear in the response to you, Councillor Johnson, earlier today, and quite clear in the answer to the question then. Thank you. Councillor Bowman, have a question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, can I just confirm, when did the public submissions close for that Friday, the 26th of May?
Thank you. They closed at roughly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and therefore we had waited till all public submissions were made before we completed the agenda and circulated that document. So public submissions were still open to 5 p.m. on that day.
And through you, Mr Mayor, to the CEO, legislation advice on what the Act says about submissions. Are we required to actually receive them all, note them all, before we form any opinions?
Mr CEO.
Thank you. As part of the Act requires, as part of the adoption of a differential rate, you need to have received and considered the public submissions. So the public submissions were received, documented and submitted to you in the form of an agenda on Friday afternoon, just shortly after the close of submission. So we waited right at that time. That's why I've said earlier on, in terms of then considering an alternate recommendation, you need to have received and considered the public submissions, which can only be contained in the officer's report. That's why our meeting procedures talk about if you're doing a motion which is different to the officer's recommendation, and until you have a report which concludes the officer's recommendation, you can't form a motion that is a valid motion.
The question is, Mr Mayor, through you, Mr Mayor, to the CEO, I did not withdraw my motion. I prepared it well in advance, anticipating the need to be early. And had I discovered that my motion was contrary to the submissions, I could have withdrawn it, but I did not, because I knew almost certainly it would be in line with the submissions. So I think I have given due consideration by not withdrawing it. So I think I was first, and I think I've got priority on this matter.
Well, it's up to me, Councillor Johnson, and I'm going to move as per the order of the agenda. That takes us to item 8, councillors, leave of absence. I have 2 requests for leave of absence. First one is from Councillor Jones from the 20th of July to the 24th of July inclusive. And the second one is for myself from the 11th of June to the 17th of June inclusive, and from the 5th of August to the 12th of August inclusive. I'm looking for a motion. Councillors, moved to Councillor Bowman, seconded Councillor Parry. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that leave approved. That takes us to part B of the agenda, councillors, and Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. I rise to move that the council resolve to 1, receive and note the information contained in the submissions. 2, having considered the submissions, to endorse the imposition of a differential general rate as follows. Do you want me to go through all the figures?
They
need to be
need to
read?
be read.
Okay.
Councillor.
Gross rental value properties, category residential, rate in the GRV dollar, 7.4780 cents, minimum rate, 938. Commercial/industrial, 9.6118 cents in the dollar, minimum rate 1,465. Heavy industry, 16.1131 cents in the dollar, minimum rate 1,765. Unimproved value properties category, UV general, rate in the dollar, 0.32844 cents, minimum rate 938. UV commercial, 0.52638 cents in the dollar, minimum rate $938. Farmland, rate in the UV dollar is 0.26319 cents and minimum rate $938. The specified area rate, area, Midland drainage, rate in the dollar, 0.6276 cents. Hazelmere/Guildford, 0.6108 cents in the dollar. Hazelmere industrial area, roads and drainage. Area, GRV properties, rate in the dollar, 3.845446 cents in the dollar. UV properties, 0.094251 cents in the dollar. Three, apply to the Minister for the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries for approval to levy heavy industry rating category at 0.161131 cents per dollar. That is more than twice the lowest residential rate in the dollar. 4, subject to the Minister's approval, impose the differential general rates in the adoption of the annual budget. 5, record the reason for changing.
If you can now read your reasons, thank you.
5, record the reasons for changing the officer's recommendation and recommending the adoption of rates at the original rate proposal as, and these are dot points. 1, the city is in the position of adopting a lower rate in the dollar and providing cost of living offset relief as requested in submissions without impacting its capacity to maintain its asset base through minor adjustments in the cost of services. Dot point 2, the lower rate would require a further operating cost savings of around $400,000, which can be accommodated through the closure of Guildford Library, equating to the value of the 0.25% rate adjustment. Dot point 3, the city is spending a considerable sum, several $1 million, on the refurbishment of the Midland Library, and this facility serves the broader Midland Guildford catchment area. Bullet point 4, the Guildford Library is a high-cost facility to operate compared to the number of visitations. There are only 2% of all library visitations made to the facility. Its closure will have a negligible impact on the community, but free up savings to help all ratepayers. Bullet point 5, staff can be redeployed to vacant positions within the library service without creating any redundancies. Bullet point 6, the Midland Guildford Historical Society have consistently petitioned the city to have an expanded space for their gallery and operations. The library building is in one of the most historical parts of the city, and Repurposing this heritage space for their use will support their endeavours. Bullet point 7, as the officer's report notes, it is essential that the city provides for ongoing asset maintenance requirements, something also strongly advocated for in the ratepayer submissions.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Yes. Councillor Compton.
Amendment.
Oh, sorry, just let me get the seconder written down first, please, councillor. You have an amendment, councillor Prodovnik.
I do, yeah.
If you can read your amendment, and I'll see if it's acceptable to the mover and the seconder.
That prior to budget adoption, the CEO present options that balances the $400,000 reduction to revenue that continues to provide for the city's essential asset renewal requirements, does not close facilities or reduce services, but still provides the city with a balanced budget.
Thank you. Do I have you're moving, seconding? Thank you, councillor McCulloch. I'll ask, is there anyone against the amendment? You wish to debate it, councillor Bowman? Then I'll need to, we have the amendment first, or we have the substantive motion? Yeah. If you can open your debate, thank you, councillor Prodovnik. You have 5 minutes.
So also the amendment stops at point 5. Is that what you've done there?
So which part are you taking out? 1, 2, 4?
So in Councillor Zanino's motion, point 5, recording the reasons, he's got the lower rate would reduce a further operating cost savings amount of 400,000. I'd put a full stop there and then delete the rest, and then put my new point. So to delete all of that from the second, point 5, the second bullet point after 400,000, delete all of that.
Thank you. I'll just wait for
Everything about the Guildford Library.
To get that. Sorry, I had a couple of conversations going on at once. So if you can just clarify, Councillor Prodovnik, because I want to get it right for everyone.
Okay, so point 5, if we go,
point 5 is the reason for change.
so we go to the second point, and then we go to
with the lower rate.
the lower rate would require further operating cost savings of amount 400,000, full stop, then delete everything after that because it targets the Guildford Library, and I want that
everything
removed.
after $400,000 you'd like deleted with your amendment inserted. Thank you. You've got 5 minutes to open your debate. Thank you.
I won't need 5 minutes. I want to make the point. I agree with a lot of the people that have come here tonight. We haven't discussed the closure of the library with any of the groups in Guildford, which means we haven't had an opportunity to explore options and discuss opportunities with various community groups in Guildford. We need to consult. We can't just blindside people like this. We can't do this. The city should not have to close any facilities or reduce services, which would only cause detriment to the community. We can find other ways to find a 0.25% rate adjustment. The city's ongoing growth puts lots of demands on it for new capital and new services, but we must still be able to maintain and renew the assets of our older communities. There are cost savings that the city should be able to make and still deliver a balanced budget, and we don't have to sacrifice the Guildford Library in order to do this. This amendment provides clarity as to how the city would find the $400,000 cost saving. The amended motion provides for a reduction of 0.25% on the advertised proposed differential rates and responds to those submissions that dealt with the cost of living challenges. Please support this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor McCulloch is the seconder of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, through you, councillors, we know the CEO can present options that balances that $400,000 reduction to revenue. We know that those options that will be presented, as requested by Councillor Prodovnik, will provide for city's essential asset renewal requirements. It's not going to close facilities or reduce services, but it's still going to provide the city with a balanced budget. So it makes sense, it's prudent, it can be worked through, that we can achieve a successful outcome for all ratepayers and residents in the city.
Thank you. Speaker against the amendment, councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we do this time and time again. Let's increase the expenditure. Let's add a new service. Well, where's the money come from? We don't know. We'll work that out later on. We do it time and time again. And I can go through all those if I want to. Mr. Mayor, I don't know what's going to come off the budget. To come off the budget, you need an operating expense that's recurrent. 400,000 recurrent operating expense. If you just take a capital item, 400,000, that's this year. Next year, you've got to take it $400,000 as well. Let's do some hard work, why don't we? And actually find real savings. That's what our job is. But if we don't want to make those decisions, well, perhaps we shouldn't be here to make those decisions. So let me go through a few items that I quickly went through. Cost of producing the calendars. Get rid of it. Mayoral Symposium, get rid of it. Swan Scoop electronic copies only. 15% reduction in printed glossary documents, strategies, annual reports, advocacies. No hard copy agendas except for those that are statutory requirement, including those for councils. Australia Day citizenships held in the town hall, not hiring a marquee. No live streaming of citizenship ceremonies. Remove the professional photographer at citizenship ceremonies. No camel rides at Eltham Comes Alive. Removal of spring water bottles from all the venues. Removal of the council clothing allowance that can be claimed. About 10% reduction in available community grant funding. No staff Christmas functions except for the whole staff function. No external retirement functions for councillors or staff. No hiring external venues for staff training. Remove the garage trails foundations membership fee. Councillors required to pay money spent on training courses that they don't attend or don't complete. Let's not open the Balladura Library on a Sunday. We've only just changed that. How about we only increase the FTEs for public health by 1, not 1.5? What about no increase instead of the 0.6 recommended for IT? What about 0.5 increase, not 1%, 1 FTE increase to tourism? How about only 3 FTE increases and not 4 to planning and approval services? What about 1 FTE increase, not 2 FTE increases to community development? How about we do an 80,000 reduction in promotional activities at the Swan Valley? How about we reduce our public art acquisition by 85,000? How about we change the opening hours of Swan Active Midland when it opens to be the same as Swan Active Beach Bar? Open at 6, not 5:30. Close at 8, not 8:30. Weekends, 8 to 5, not 7 to 6. How about we go for cost neutral for community aged care services, therefore increasing the fees? How about we do the catering cost reductions? What about we delete the Christmas tree at Allenbrook and any other Christmas decorations? How about we get rid of the Bullsbrook CFC not operating on Mondays, 8:30 to 11:30? How about we do the free street tree request limit to trees only, not shrubs? Why don't we remove the Rewild project? How about we reduce the ward tree planting from 1.5 to 1 million? How about we reduce the library book replacements by 50,000? How about we remove the Allenbrook Arts Centre feasibility assessments? Why has no one come up with options? Everyone's happy to make the easy decisions of increasing services. Now, little financial equation, and Councillor Parry, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the other one that's got a financial degree here. But if expenses go up or we increase services and we don't want to close anything, we need more money. That's the only way that can happen. So, councillors, I can't support this motion because I don't know where this 400,000 is coming from. We're not making the hard decisions, and that's what our job is. You may not like to make those hard decisions, and I see time and time again in this council chambers, we put our hands up for a number of items. Yes, I know I've got a minute left.
1 minute left, thank you.
For a number of items, where do you think the money's coming from? It all comes to the budget time, and guess what? It's a reflection on rates.
Thank you. Speaker for the amendment, councillor Congdon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I put my hand up to second the Councillor Zanino's motion, it was a very complex motion. And I never intended to support the closure of the Guildford Library. I want to make that quite clear. It was in order that this motion could be heard at council and the amendment be put in by Councillor Brodovnik. If we talk about the list of items that could be removed to accommodate the 400,000 that's been spoken to by Councillor Bowman, I'd just like people in the gallery to understand the comments. To remove the festoon lights, which is an amenity issue for Midland, was suggested. Take away the Bottlebrush Drive footpath. To not put in a golf.
Point of order.
No, sorry.
Sorry, what's your point of order, Councillor Bowman?
Mr Mayor, I didn't actually mention any of those items.
You'll have to keep your comments to the items that Councillor Bowman listed. Thank you. I uphold the point of order. Please continue.
Okay. To all the items that Councillor Bowman said, and I have a full list of the questions that were sent to the staff in relation to these costs, there are an awful lot of items that our community has asked for. And it would be improper to remove those from the list. And I'm pretty sure that there's a whole bunch of other things that the CEO could find. And we'll be talking about having this done year after year after year after year. It's been year after year after year after year that we've accommodated the costs for various things within the city. We find a way. We always find a way. So the most important part about this amendment to the motion tonight is the retention of the Guildford Library. And that's what we should be talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the amendment? Speaker for the amendment? Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I actually thought this amendment was about deleting references to the Guildford Library, not about anything else. So I'm going to stick to just that. Councillors, I think we've seen in the 4 hours that this alternate motion of Councillor Zanino's has been available to the public. I think we've had about 50 or 60 emails, possibly more than that, from users of the library explaining how disappointed they are by the mere suggestion. We've also had an email from the Swan Guildford Historical Society. So the Swan Guildford Historical Society is mentioned in the full motion, something we've deleted. They say that they'll be seeking a Lotteries West grant to fund a business case study for a museum for their collection. The two options they've considered are the return of the courthouse in Guildford and a purpose-built building on the precinct between the jail and the Potter's House. So they've not considered the library at all, and I'm pretty sure they would not want to do something that would impact the library. Swan Guildford Historical Society have not been consulted about this. Fogel and the community have not been consulted about this idea to save money on the Guildford Library. So it came as a great surprise to me when I read this, and a great surprise to everybody in the community. Look, councillors, staff and the community have worked hard to make the library flourish. The Friends of Guildford Library have cooperated with staff to suggest programmes that would be of interest to the community. You heard about them from Jane Genovese and I think Jane Dewing. Fogel met through the pandemic. They've run their own events and established a library garden, which they've watered and cared through the hot summer months. The garden is due to be extended thanks to the support of Guildford Garden Centre, so we're making the outside of the library look good. The partnership is actually featured in the latest issue of Swan Scoop. We're talking about an active community group of the kind we are encouraging in the city of Swan. Guildford Library is WA's only community-led library. It may be small, but it's very valued by the community. By all reports, the story time and rhyme time are full. The art classes on a Friday are very popular. The JP service, organised by Fogel, has attracted many people. We're talking about a thriving community hub. And we have to remember that people in Guildford have been paying their rates to support this library for about 150 years. So I think to suddenly take it away now, when there's been no change in the libraries around it, wouldn't be appropriate. Councils providing services such as libraries, swimming pools, parks and footpaths is what council is all about. No one in the community has asked to close this library to save money. I don't think anyone anywhere in the city of Swan would wish Guildford to lose its library, just as no one in Guildford would want any other area to lose a valued service such as this library. So, councillors, that's why I'm supporting this amendment. I think with this amendment, the motion is a reasonable one. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the amendment? Any other speakers for or against the amendment? Being no other speakers, Councillor Budovnik, you have 3 minutes for your right of reply. Thank
I
you.
won't take that long. Simply, this amendment asks the CEO to present options that finds $400,000 savings and balances the budget. I've spoken to the CEO before I raised this amendment tonight. It can be done. It should be done. Please support this amendment.
Thank you. I'm now putting the amendment, councillors. The amendment, if passed, will become part of the substantive motion. Those in favour of the amendment? Of Councillor Jones, Councillor Budovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Richardson, Councillor McCulloch. I make that 13. Those against were Councillor Bowman and Councillor Parry. The amendment is passed and becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll now ask, is there anyone against the substantive motion? You wish to debate it, Councillor Catalano? Thank you. We'll now move to the substantive motion. And Councillor Zanino, you've got 5 minutes to open your debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I rise to speak on behalf of my amended motion. Councillors, clearly the cost of living has increased substantially. Interest rates have risen 11 times in the past 12 months, and utility charges, power and water, are up, which our city has no impact upon as they are controlled by government. It's also worth noting that the ABS released figures this month advise that the seasonally adjusted wage price index rose 3.7% annually. As a local government, the City of Swan is the largest in geographical area in the Perth metropolitan area. With a population of 160,000 plus, our city has one of the highest growth rates. According to Forecast ID, between 2021 and 2051, the population for the City of Swan is forecast to increase by 88%, or around 140,000 residents. It's fair to say our residents and ratepayers rightfully expect a high standard of facilities and services that our council provides. So we need to be vigilant and realistic on how we proceed. This council has an obligation to represent the City of Swan, to provide leadership, plan for the future, manage assets, and govern finances set out by the city's business and financial plans. This means managing our city's affairs to ensure services and facilities are meeting expectations and benefiting residents and ratepayers. In a perfect world, who wouldn't support a 0% rate increase? It's definitely a short-term fix, but when you look at it logistically, it is unwise and seriously detrimental to the city's and ratepayers' future. Why, you may ask? Because the city has had a 0% rate increase 3 years in a row now, and this simply cannot be sustained. The city needs to maintain its assets and services, and this council should not have to close facilities or reduce services. This would ultimately cause detriment to the community and impact on the city's future prosperity. Making quality decisions means facing reality and aiming for the best outcome overall. By supporting an appropriate rate increase this year and next year means the city's ongoing growth and demands on new capital projects and services can be managed, along with the ongoing maintenance requirements and the renewal of assets in our older communities. By being short-sighted and wanting another 0 rate rise, would possibly mean a substantial rate increase in future years, which could mean increases of anything from 6, 7, 8, 9% to 14%. This has actually happened in other local authorities. Councillors, let's fulfil our duty as councillors and provide the necessary leadership, good governance, and financial responsibility that is required. A realistic approach is needed, so I urge you to support this motion, which provides for a reduction of 0.5% on the advertised proposed differential rate and, importantly, maintains an appropriate level of service. I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question. What is the rate increase proposed by Councillor Zanino? It's not in the motion.
I thought it was 3.25.
So I'm looking in the officer's report and it says 3.75. So minus 0.25, isn't that 3.5?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you. The advertised differential rates on 2nd of May were of 3.75% increase as a result of the advice. And that was set on, if you may recall, the amendment moved on the 9th result of the Western Power increase of 0.5%. That was going to have the effect. As the Western Power increase is not as great, we proposed to reduce that from the proposed ads rate down to 3.5%. So the motion being put forward by Councillor Zanino is a quarter percent less than that at 3.25.
Thank you, Councillor Congdon, as the seconder to the substantive motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors and those in the gallery and those listening, I'm not disputing that times are tough for everybody. Probably not everybody, but for some people. And the city has a hardship policy to take care of those vulnerable and those in distress. And this is the approach that should be taken by those who find themselves in a position of not being able to meet their monetary requirements. A zero council rate increase means that the council will have less money to spend on essential services such as road maintenance, parks, gardens, waste management, public safety, and necessary new infrastructure. This could lead in a decline of the quality of these services, which could negatively impact on the community as a whole. Limited investment on infrastructure and necessary maintenance on old infrastructure also limits the council's ability to invest in new infrastructure products such as parks, community centres, and new amenities and facilities for the community. If the council is unable to generate enough revenue through the rates, this leads to more borrowings to fund essential services and infrastructure projects. This could lead to an increased debt levels, which have long-term financial implications for council and, more importantly, the community. A lack of investment in infrastructure and essential services could have a negative impact on the local economy. Businesses may be less likely to invest in the city if they feel the council is not adequately supporting the community as a whole. A decline in the quality of essential services and infrastructure could also lead to a decline in property values. This could also have a negative impact on homeowners and investments in the area. It is unsustainable to continue to hold rates at zero for the city.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to argue against this 3.25% rate increase for the same reasons that I argued against the 3.75% increase when it came before Council on the 2nd of May. This will be for quite a lot of people, particularly those in Ellenbrook, Averley, Brigadoon, and they're the ones that I can remember, but there are a few other suburbs. This is going to be on a percentage increase in their GRV. So that's the gross rental value. So they're going to have a double whammy there. And as I said last time, this is a massive increase for suburbs where we have the highest number of mortgages, the highest amount of mortgage stress, and the greatest number of young families. Thank you, Councillor Bowman, for outlining all the savings that we could make. quite a number of those I've already brought before council, trying to get them knocked off the calendar and the mayoral dinner, and I'm happy to knock all of those off. Thank you. And that's the operational expenditure that I've been talking about. That's what needs to go. That's where we need to make our savings. We can't keep relying on putting up the rates and putting our residents, our ratepayers, our families under stress, because, those people won't have places to live. That puts us all under great stress. I won't even talk about the hardship policy, because we don't put band-aids on a gushing wound. I mean, let's just get it right from the very beginning. No, I can't. Sorry, I can't support this. And I think it's time that we look at reducing expenditure, and just as we can start with those things that Councillor Bowman outlined.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was elected to council 14 years ago, I was shocked to learn how many assets the City of Swan was responsible for and had to maintain, replenish or replace once their end of life came around. This motion is a responsible action to ensure that ratepayers of the future are not left with a massive burden down the track. Please let's look at this from a responsible position and not as a possible political put-up. We were elected and entrusted with ratepayers' contributions to make these tough but responsible decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I'm opposed to this. The reason being that under this proposal of Councillor Zanino's, the average ratepayer will pay an additional $44 per year. Now, some may say $44 extra per year is not very much, but this rise can't be considered in isolation. We know there are pressures on our ratepayers from all directions. In challenging times, if it's in this council's power not to answer those pressures, then we should do so. Councillors, please consider the nearly 200 submissions received from our ratepayers. If you've read the report, you will see that almost without exception, the ratepayers are demanding a 0% rise this year. Some councillors have spoken about it's up to us to be responsible. Well, look, I think our ratepayers are responsible and they're well informed. Thanks to social media and the city's website, where the agenda report is available for all to read, I think they understand what the issues are, and I think they know how we can save the money. We've had some ideas from Councillor Bowman, and had a few ideas from Councillor Catalano, and as councillors know, in my alternate motion, which I'll foreshadow if this one is not successful, we'll be looking at a 0% rate rise this year through not putting $5 million into our reserves, but instead reducing rates by $5 million. Going back to those submissions, I think about 99% of our well-informed ratepayer submissions support an average 0% rates rise this year. Councillors will need to consider, as Councillor Zanino said, the economic environment our ratepayers faced. And it's very, very good analysis, Councillor Zanino. The consumer price index for Perth is 5.8% and the wage price index is just 3.7%. Prices are rising faster than wages. The mortgage rate has gone up 11 times since November 2020. The RBA cash rate in November 2020 was 0.1%, and now in May 2023, it's 3.85%. If you have a mortgage, your interest rate will have gone up by 3.75%. If you have a typical $300,000 mortgage, then since November 2020, your mortgage payments, if you're paying an interest-only mortgage without a capital repayment, that will go up by $900 a month, and you can check that on your calculator or any calculator on any bank website. That's a lot of money. So obviously, we're not making people buy houses, but we're not involved in the in mortgage interest rates. But councillors, we have an awful lot of people in our growth area who have recently bought houses. We have a disproportionate number of people who have young families who are making these additional mortgage repayments. So it's disproportionately impacting recent home buyers who've probably got young families, and it's disproportionately impacting families in the city of Swan. Let's not add to a rates increase, to the household budget. We're here to represent the community. The community understand what's at stake here. They understand the finances. I've noticed year after year we get more and more submissions on this. I think when I first got on council, we might get, 15 one year, but now we're getting over 200. Councillors, everyone understands the impact of not collecting as much rates, but as several councils have said, there are ways of getting down to 0%. And this decision we're making tonight is not about the budget. It is just about the rate in the dollar. And the motion I foreshadowed has
1 minute left, thank you.
In effect has a 0% rise, and it means that on average our community would get a 0% rate rise. So councillors, there's a very good motion on the table after this one. So if you choose to vote against this one, things are going to get even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for the motion. Question, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CEO, Councillor Johnson talked about reserves. A couple of questions. Why does the city have reserves? What's the total amount of money the city is holding in reserves? What is the money allocated for? And is this documented in our long-term strategic plans? So probably the first three.
Well, perhaps just to repeat the first one.
Why does the city and local government have reserves?
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, and through the chair, reserves are held by local government to meet its future needs. They are held in individual accounts, so each reserve has a specific purpose that must be advertised, and the monies can only be spent on that purpose. For instance, the city has a reserve called the Ellenbrook Community Facilities Reserve. It has $554,000 in it, or did have at the 31st of March. That money can only be spent in Ellenbrook on community facilities. The city has an employee entitlements reserve to meet the long service need and annual leave requirements of employees. As the 31st of March, it had $10.2 million. That money can only be spent back on the employees to meet their liabilities. So whilst the city has a significant amount of money at one hand in reserve, some $300 million, the vast majority of that is development contribution funds being received and held by the city, paid for by developers, which must be spent back on the infrastructure that they hold. The vast majority of the city's monies that it holds are in restricted reserves. They cannot be spent on any other purpose. In terms of its asset management reserve, as mentioned tonight, that there's roughly $2 billion worth of assets, the city holds $21 million in reserve to meet its future asset management requirements, which is a significant shortfall on what we have suspected will be required for future years.
Mr. Mayor,
next question.
Through you to the CEO. Mr. CEO, you mentioned DCPs. Is it correct that those growth councils will have a lot more in DCP reserves because of the growing?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, through the chair. It's interesting, I've done a detailed analysis over the last few months of the city's DCPs, and interestingly, just for council. Now, the first DCP the city adopted was in 2010-11. At that time, the liability was for $10 million. That's all we had to build. As at today, some 12 years later, the city's liability stands at $650 million for its DCPs. I note that the forecast 2 DCPs will have, the North Ellenbrook and North West Ellenbrook, will add potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of additional funds required for the DCPs. The City of Swan holds the largest DCP liability, the most complex set of DCPs. The next nearest to us is the City of Wanneroo.
And Mr. Mayor, through you, I've got told, we've got rainy day investments or reserves. Is that correct? Because I didn't see a rainy day reserve. Is there a big bucket of money somewhere that hasn't been allocated to something?
Mr. CEO?
I'd like to smile and say, yes, there is a big bucket of money somewhere, but that there isn't. In fact, most recently, we asked Council to consider establishing 2 additional reserves. One was the Deferred Projects Reserve. We brought that to you and you've agreed to do that. That's to park projects that we simply couldn't deliver at that time. And the other one, the Strategic Community Facilities Reserve. So projects like the Ellenbrook Swimming Pool, which is and Community Centre, which is being requested as part of our planning, can be funded for the future. But in answer to Councillor Bowman's question, every reserve has a specific purpose. There is no reserve called the Rainy Day Reserve.
You're speaking or you have a question? Question, Councillor Parry.
Can I ask, which projects do we currently have in the 23-24 Capital Works budget, draft budget, if you don't mind, Mr. CEO? And can you give us the amounts too, please?
I have to refer that to Mr. Coaten, if I could specifically.
Sorry, could I didn't quite catch it. Which project?
Please advise which projects we have based on the draft 23-24 in the asset works, but in the asset replacement reserve.
Oh, that are funded from the asset replacement reserve.
And the amounts too, please.
There's the, bear with me. For 23-24, I don't know that. I don't think we've got the list specifically for the 23-24. Hang on, sorry, I tell a lie. Midland Library is coming. There's 970,000. Sorry, understand. Midland Library 970,000. Swan Active Beachborough 602,000. Ellenbrook Resource Centre 40,000. Western Swan Home Support 750,000. Gidgegunnup Agricultural Hall 58,000. Midland Lotteries House 200,000. Midland Town Hall 350,000. Midvale Netball Centre 1,661,000. Yeah, so I think.
So follow-up question. So is it safe to assume that of the $5 million taken out by the reserve by Councillor Johnston's motion, that $3.5 million relates to the Midland Guildford Ward this year, please?
Thank you. I'll ask again, are there any other speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I hadn't intended to speak, but I just wanted to make a couple of points that I feel are very important. When I came onto council in 2015, I had an agenda to reduce our rate increases as much as practically possible. That took 2 years before that progressed. However, we got to a point where our rates came down to an acceptable level. We ultimately got down to 0, 0 and 0. And the last 2 were, of course, very difficult for us. We had to look very carefully at how to skin the cat, so to speak, to get the money. And I accept very much that that caused a lot of pain. It did within the organisational structure. Our community complained that our gardens hadn't been properly tended regularly. We've had to cut back some of our operating programs. So clearly you can cut, and I think that's an aspect that we achieved when we had to. We really did have to during those couple of years of COVID. And I just want to get to the point. I remember a parliamentary discussion about a magic pudding. You know, we could talk about the magic pudding all day, but it's only got so much pudding in it. So it comes down to, from a straight up business perspective, and that's what I want to talk about, is our responsibility to maintain the assets for the community and to provide for their needs and wants. And we can argue, as Councillor Bowman has, endlessly about a lot of things that just might be a little bit superfluous. I do think some of them are. And I do think that they are matters for future hard discussion. When we need to have those hard discussions, we should be saying, okay, these are things that are not local government remit. I do believe that we should be doing that. And in fact, this last budget process, I was very restrained in, if you want, the wish list of things that we needed to do. And I'm still of the view that we could have cut a little bit more to be able to help a little bit further. But of course, the collective voice of the council has decided what it wants to do in its operating program, and that's what we're here to do, to represent the community. So I accept that. Now I can go to the community and say that we have done very well in the last few years, and that it's now time for us to ensure that we can get back to maintaining our gardens a bit better, and the works program that they are actually saying they want improvements on. So in that regard, I'm prepared to accept what I believe is a moderate increase, particularly against massive inflation, and that's the thing that we face. We've got pay rises, we've got fuel costs, we've got electricity, all of those things. They don't come out of that magic pudding. It's got a balance. So I want to be very clear that whilst none of us like increases in anything, and yes, for some of us out there, it's pretty tough. I accept that. However, we have a responsibility, and I think this is a responsible decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'm speaking against this motion because I think we should have identified where the $400,000 is coming from. My views are completely different to what we've heard from Councillor Johnson and Councillor Catalano. Councillors, hard decisions and being fiscally responsible is what is needed. Yet sometimes I wonder if that's the case. Let's just start with this financial year. That's probably one of the benefits of being full-time councillor. I can go through quite a few things and have a look. A quick review of some of the things, just some of the things. And I know there's many more, so please, I've missed some. These are the things that councillors have voted on and agreed to this year that have increased expenditures. Midland Junction Art Centre, 6 days. Sporting facilities for female patrons. Design review panel. Subsidised CCTV scheme. Swan Valley and Swan Athletic Sporting Clubs increased contributions. Arts in Ellenbrook. Jack Williamson Oval. DFIBs. Midland Streetscape. Women Wellness Session. Dayton Entry Sign. If you voted for any of these councillors, where do you think the extra money would have come from? Councillors, it was me last year that questioned the budget process. It was me that questioned figures, new FTEs and particular budget amounts. And it was me that was concerned about the level of understanding of some in what is a critically important role that councillor has. I also stated that it needs to be more transparent, more accountable and more open. This year, the process that has been undertaken is a level I expect. We were provided with detailed financial information. We were provided with the where, the why, the how, and we had real input and then more input. For those that turned up to the workshops, came prepared, had analysed figures beforehand and actively participated in the budget workshops, all the answers to our questions were provided. And we had the opportunity to query anything and everything. And I make no apology for being that one councillor at these workshops that submitted a number of questions and concerns and raised many issues in the workshop, even when I know some people wanted to go home. Councillors, the change that has been drastic, and I have to thank our CEO for making this happen. In fact, he is now taking us beyond what most other local governments do and provide. And I'm especially thankful that we now also have been provided service plans. And I hope councillors at budget adoption will agree to make these public for scrutiny. Therefore, what I find surprising is only when it came to the special council meeting on the 2nd of May that 4 councillors did not support the advertising proposed rate in the dollar, which represented the 3.75% increase. This was discussed, it was workshopped, and we had ample opportunity to raise concerns, but I'm not aware of any being raised. Why wait until the special council meeting? What changed from the workshop to the special council meeting? Was there new information that was provided? Perhaps it was. If so, Did I miss something? Councillors, for the first time I've been on council, it feels like, for me, it feels like we are looking at the future, looking how we can and how we're going to implement many of the great strategies, improvements and large projects that our community is wanting and have been asking for, instead of just being a wish list on paper. The Allenbrook Pool is one in my ward. What's in your ward? More importantly for me, and perhaps because of my financial background, I am seeing the financial considerations and financial planning to make these happen that were not previously a strong point of Swan. Councillors, at the 2nd of May meeting, I spoke and indicated I was happy to go on I think I said a slash and burn. So I did that. Now, councillors, you heard all those that I said before. That's only $2.5 million. I don't agree with all those because I know the impact. The CEO in Budget Workshop told us the reason why he needs increase in FTEs. He provided the data with us. We could have questioned that. I think I questioned on 1 or 2, and he provided the information back. Councillor Congdon jumped the gun because then I thought, well, $2.5 million, need to find a bit more capital costs. Well, we can balance the budget this year. It doesn't work next year. And Councillor Congdon's right. Most of the list, Ron Jose Park reconfiguration, Festoon Lights, Midland, footpath, Bottlebrush Drive, footpath, Farrell Road, Farewell Park Bench, Drink Fountain, the Goalpost, Sandown Park Drink Fountain, Lassen Park Drink Fountain, Brook Park Bench. These are all things that our community have asked us for. I can go on. Councillors, I'm happy to support a lower rate increase to that officer's recommendation. I can even support a 0% rate increase. But you first have to make the hard decisions and show me how this is going to be achieved. It is a fiscally responsible way and not just taking it from reserves. I'm being consistent. As last year during workshops, I stated the same, yet no operating savings were tabled. Without this and no one wanting to remove services that our community want and need, capital items that or community have asked for by putting up the prices for services that some of the most vulnerable people use, how are you proposing to do it? So, therefore, unless there are further operating costs that councillors have or can bring to the table, the $5 million can't be achieved. It's a massive impact to our community, the impact the community desires and wants. These are the things that the community desires and wants. So please, we need to make the hard decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. That's your time. Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a very boring councillor, so I just do statistics as my analysis. So we want to look at the Ellenbrook suburb, for example, using the 2021 census in regards to wages. So if you look at the median weekly household income, you've got $95,888 as tax taken off at 22.27%, leaves a net gain of $74,533. Monthly mortgage repayments, according to the census, is $1,800 a month, which equals $21,600. Therefore, leaving a net addressable income of $52,933.74. If you have a rate increase of $40, it is 0.1% of the addressable income in Ellenbrook. That's all it is, 0.1% of addressable income in Ellenbrook. We hear a lot of politicisation in regards to the rate issue, and sometimes it is warranted, but not this time, because in times where CPI has dramatically increased, where PPI has also dramatically increased, where construction costs have dramatically increased year upon year upon year upon year, where supply chains have not decreased their lead times in regards to major machine purchases, construction purposes, other reasons as well. We just can't hold for 0% rate rises over 4 years. It's just not feasible. The politicisation of this issue is beyond a joke sometimes, in my opinion. If any Ballajura resident came to me and asked me what have I achieved in the past 4 years, I'll tell them the truth. In regards to a $54 increase, which may be a bit less or a bit more depending on where they are, my residents in 4 years have got Kingfisher lights, Lions Oval lights, Belford and Marangaroo upgrades, 8 parks upgraded, Illawarra streetscaping, Belfin streetscaping, Hepburn streetscaping, CCTV tours, City Central Lakes lighting upgrade, Arlington Park parade, Emu Swamp and Lake upgrade, cycle path bridge from South Ballajura to Metronet, and an all abilities playground that my community has been screaming out for the past 4 years. I'm proud of my efforts on council. Now, in regards to being a council, we have one obligation, and that's to leave the city in a better place than when we left it or when we started off. I'm proud of the fact that over the past 4 years, we've survived COVID in regards to our financial modelling. I'm more proud of the fact of the Waterloo fires in regards to the $3.8 million that we spent over the time we've had the Waterloo fires. If you want to look it up, look in the financial reports, councillors. That amount was unbudgeted for. Now, you may not like the increases of rates, but there is a good reason why you do increase rates, and that's for the rainy day. It may not be a slush fund, but there are rainy days in council. And I know for a fact that, and we often hear stories about community safety and all those things. The proudest moment of the 4 years that I've been on council was the fact the community banded together and donated a significant amount of funds and protected other members of the community in the Waterloo fires. That's a huge factor as well. And by the way, in regards to the asset revaluation reserve, I'd like to remind councillors on the 15th of April 3 years ago, we rated it $8.85 million to pay for those park upgrades that you all wanted as well. You can't just keep taking away money, councillors. You just can't do it whenever you feel like it. Someday you need to replenish it. It's just fiscally irresponsible if you do not replenish the reserve funds that you've taken away in your term of government. You may not like having to rate increase in an election year. I say toughen up. You have to sometimes. You have to stand up for what you believe for. And I'm very comfortable in my community. And yes, by the way, Balladura is one of the highest mortgage delinquency rates in all of Australia as well. And I'm comfortable saying to them, you just need to pay 0.1% more of your addressable income, taking away your mortgage and your taxes. It's not that much, is it, councillors? We have a financial responsibility to set up our next council as well, councillors. This is a rate review. That's all it is. Budgets are moving documents. We can decide to change things in the future as well. We have mid-year reviews. We have financial reports that we can ask questions in regards to that. Now, I know for a fact that there have been some councils that have voted for cost increases, such as Steam Clean for $3.9 million a year. How would that go? Would you all feel comfortable who voted for that to increase it by that much as well? And some councils also voted for a land tax on increase, but yet speaking against a rate review, or sorry, hold the rates to zero as well. Bit hypocritical, isn't it? The other thing about a budget is the fact that we must also consider the 10-year strategic plan of this community as well. It's not just for the mayoral election to win votes in Ellenbrook. It's not just for your next vote or your next election yourself, councillors. You have a higher obligation than that. Serve this community well.
Thank you, Councillor Parry.
30 more seconds, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Well, with the indulgence of council.
I think it...
Please continue, Councillor. Please continue, Councillor Parry.
I don't care what Councillor Johnson says. He doesn't know his fiscal responsibility anyway, so
Councillor
keep going. Yeah,
Parry,
okay.
if you want to finish, please do so.
And I'd also like to raise as well...
Mr.
What's
Mayor.
your point of order,
That's a bit
Councillor?
detrimental.
Why would you write, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Thank you.
So in regards to that as well, I also like to note that the $3.5 million in regards to the reserves is going to be spent in Midland Guildford. I find it quite hypocritical that a council that is asking to remove the reserve away to spend it this year. Thank you very much.
What's your point of order,
I
Councillor
think
Johnson?
suggesting councils are hypocritical is detrimental.
Well, Councillor Parry's finished his debate now, so we'll move on. I'll ask again, are there any other speakers for or against the motion? Being no other speakers, Councillor Zanino, you're right to reply. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to go into it in a big way. I've listened to comments from all the speakers, both for and against, and all I can say is that, as I stated in my debate, rate rises will keep going up. All the utility rises will be going up as well, unless someone's got a crystal ball. And Councillor Johnson's comment about rating $5 million from the reserves, That puts you an extra $5 million behind the eight ball.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
What's your
That's
point of
incorrect
order?
statement. I'm not raiding $5 million from the reserves at all. I'm just proposing that we don't increase rates by $5 million and therefore we don't pay $5 million into the reserves. So I'm not raiding it also. It's an incorrect statement, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Zanino. You can just finish off your debate and withdraw that remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just finish by saying that I'm not surprised that certain councillors would be against giving struggling ratepayers a rate relief. They'd rather, have self-satisfaction than really be concerned about struggling ratepayers, because what they're proposing is that they may be saving a few dollars this year, but as I said previously, next year and the year after, this council would have to certainly make some really difficult decisions, and you won't be increasing rates by 3.25% or 3.5%, because to make up the deficits, you'll be looking at 10 to 12 or 14%. And I'd like to see how the councillors will be responding to the ratepayers in that situation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now, councillors, I'm going to put the substantive motion as amended. Those in favour of Councillor Jones, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Singh, Councillor Congdon, myself, Councillor Parry, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson and Councillor McCulloch, which is 9. Those against were Councillors Bowman, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Knight and Councillor Richardson, which is 6. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to part C of the agenda, which is a confidential item.